6. 36 divided by 6 is 6, indicating a 6 represents a yin line. All in all, there was enough information for Zhu Xi to recreate a method for the Yarrow Stalk Divination. That method was full of ceremony, using a special table with notches, burning incense, making invocations to the spirits, and so on. In practice, I found my way to a different method. It is easier and still resonates well enough with the great treaties, and it is faster. This is not to say it sacrificed what is sacred, for we bring sacredness to the equation by rooting to heaven and earth as we reside deep within the quiescence of our heart minds. Zhu Xi's method involves setting stalks aside, but the great treatise clearly uses holding the stalks between the fingers. I came to wonder if the stalks needed to be set down at all. In Zhu Xi's method, we set one stalk aside and begin our fourfold operation, first with dividing the stalks and setting them down. Second, with placing one from the right pile between the fingers of the pinky and the ring finger of the left hand. Third, with taking up the left pile and counting 4s until we get a remainder. And placing that remainder between the ring and middle fingers, then setting that pile down. And fourth, with taking up the right pile and counting 4s until we get a remainder. And placing them between the middle and index finger and setting that pile down. Then we take all the stalks from between the fingers and set them aside. We then take what is left of our 2 piles, combine them together again, and repeat the procedure twice more. This gives us then the 3 piles we need to calculate the quality of a hexagram line from a small pile of 4 or 5 is assigned to 3, while a large pile of 8 or 9 is assigned to 2, and the 3 piles are added to give a 6, 7, 8, or 9. A 6 for active yin, 7 for passive yang, 8 for passive yin, and 9 for active yang. And so we repeat this 3-fold procedure until we have our 6 hexagram lines. In any case, these remainders between the fingers are what Zhu Xi uses to explain the intercalary remainders, the leap months from the great treaties. With this method, we set the stalks down a lot, and to keep things organized, Zhu Xi used a special table with notches in it so that the various piles could be placed in notches in the table and then be kept organized in that way. With my method, we tuck one stalk behind the ear, then begin our 4-fold operation, first with dividing the stalks, but keeping them held in the left and the right hands. Second, with placing one from the right pile, between the ring and pinky finger of the left hand. Third, with counting 4s from the left pile until we get a remainder. And then adding them to the single stalk. And fourth, by calculating what the remainder of the right pile would be, because we can already determine that from the remainder of the left pile. It is important to note that in our first of 3 divisions in the process of calculating a single line, we end up with 5 or 9 stalks. And in the next 2 divisions, we end up with 4 or 8 stalks. This is because at first we have an odd number of stalks, and after the remainder is set aside, we have an even number of stalks from there on out. Taking that into consideration, we know that if we end up with 1, 2, or 3 stalks from the left pile of our first divination, we are unable to arrive at a pile of 9, and thereby can take the amount of stalks from the right pile that we need to make a pile of 5. And add them to our remainder between the pinky and ring finger. It is only if we end up with a remainder of 4 from the left pile that we will also end up with a remainder of 4 from the right pile plus the 1 from the first operation to make a pile of 9. Now we have our first remainder held between the fingers that represents the first leap month. Proceeding to the second of 3 divisions, we first divide Second, place 1 from the right pile between the ring and middle fingers, thus beginning our second set of intercalary remainders, of leap month remainders. Third, count the remainder of the left pile. And add it to the 1. Fourth, calculate the remainder of the right pile without counting and add its remainder to the new set. So we have 4. So that means we would end up with 4 as a remainder from the right pile. So we'll just take that from the right pile, though it doesn't really matter which we take it from. And we have a pile of 8. Here, because we had an even number of stalks being counted, a 1 or 2 remaining in the left pile meant we would end up with the small pile of 4, and thus would have a remainder of 1 or 2 from the right pile. And since we had a remainder of 3 or 4 from the left pile, we ended up with a large pile of 8 and had a remainder of 4, which could have also been 3, from the right pile. And we are calculating the remainder rather than counting it, because while holding these 2 remainders between the fingers, it would be rather difficult to count 4s from the right pile. Now we have our 2 sets of remainders between the fingers, just like the Great Treatise describes, representing the first and second intercalary months, or leap months. Proceeding to the third of 3 divisions, we first divide. But here we change things. We do not need to hold another remainder between the fingers because this is our final division, and everything can be calculated as though we did already set one aside. So we do not need to take a single stalk from the right pile and add it to the fingers, but we mentally account for it as the second step anyway, because we will still be accounting for it. Third, we count the remainder from the left. And fourth, we, accounting for the single stalk we would have taken, we determine the remainder from the right, in the same way we did in the second operation. So here we would have 2, so that means we have a small pile of 4, and we would have 4 stalks. Those 4 stalks would be a 3, plus our pile of 8, which is a 2, so that's 5, plus our pile of 5 here, which is a 3, so we have an 8. So that would be a passive yin line. Now we know our number of stalks for the third division, and we have the number of stalks for the first 2 divisions between our fingers, so we can add them all up on the spot. The Great Treatise does say that after the 2 remainders, one arrives at an interim calculation, and that 18 interim calculations complete the process. This method would be said to have 6 interim calculations after the 2 remainders. If it were not for that, this method might be quite in alignment with the Great Treatise. However, it does allow divination from horseback or from a carriage, and it allows for 10-minute divinations with the Yarrow Stalks. I find it hard to believe that this method was not discovered and in use, as it offers much more flexibility than the highly time and space consuming method of Zhu Xi's. Any who would have consulted the I Ching with the Yarrow Stalks frequently would have discovered this shorthand method, much as I stumbled upon it. I will continue to perform a full divination based on this method. Let us ask about unconditional love as our topic. So that would be 8 for a third. So a 2, a 3, and a 3. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Should be a passive yin line. Let me just do this 5 more times. It is very important to count very carefully because we are just calculating the remainder from the right pile instead of actually counting it. If we were counting it, it would serve to correct any counting mistakes we would make when counting the left pile. So we have 2 plus our third, so that would be a pile of 4. So that's a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is our active yang. Sometimes a stalk likes to hide behind another stalk, and so I make sure to make sure that's not happening. So I'm getting just a pile of 4. But even so, this method goes fairly quickly. So there's a 1, so we have 3 from the right. It's when I'm doing the dividing of the stalks that I really try and tap into that connection between heaven and earth. Just kind of really connect with the spirits. Really connect with the question I'm holding in my mind. And it may sound like there's a lot of counting and mathing going on, but really it's just becomes second nature. I really do mean that anyone who did this quite frequently would just have come up with this naturally. So we have 1 plus our 1 is 2, which means 2 more, so that's a 4, which is a number 3 plus our 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have our trigram of winds with two yang changing lights. Unconditional love. That which powers everything. So here we have our 4 from the left pile, which means plus the 1 is 5, which means we have to have 4 from the right pile. And we get our pile of 9. I do find that having the 12-inch long Yarrow stalks is very helpful for this. And even though I have larger hands, it is not impossible to do this with smaller hands. Unconditional love. So we have 4 plus 1 is 5 plus 3 is 8. And so that's our 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have our 8, which is a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Unconditional love. here we have our 3 plus our 1 that we set aside is 4, which means we have a 4 remaining, so that's the 8. So that's that 2, plus our 2 is 4, plus our 2 is 6. So we finally get a yin changing line. So hexagram 28, lake over wind, wind under lake, with 3 lines changing. And there we have it. I find this method very useful to perform a divination that is still sacred and allows me ample meditative time to feel into my divination while still being accessible and usable, even if a clear table is not available. Thank you so much.